Good morning and welcome to Glasgow Science Centre's Curious About Our Planet Digital Science Festival. Today I'm really excited to be joined by Rhona Kent from WWF UK, who is going to be talking to us about technology and how it can be used to reduce wildlife and human conflict in the Arctic. After the presentation, you can ask any questions you want about Rhona's career or her experience. She'll be joining us again. So leave a comment next to our YouTube live stream and we'll hopefully get round to as many as we can after the presentation. But for now, I'm going to hand you over to Rhona.
My name is Rhona Kent. I'm a polar ocean specialist with WWF UK. I have a background in marine and freshwater biology, and I previously worked as a fisheries scientist and marine protected areas policy officer. I will be focusing on human and wildlife conflict in the Arctic, but I just wanted to give you a brief introduction to both of the polar regions. So here you can see this is the Arctic. The Arctic is in the northern hemisphere and is an ocean surrounded by land. The Arctic Ocean is the world's smallest ocean at around 5 million kilometres squared. The countries that surround the Arctic Ocean are the USA, Canada, Greenland, Norway and Russia. Sweden and Finland also have Arctic terrestrial regions. Antarctica, as you can see on this side here, is in the southern hemisphere and is a continent surrounded by the Southern Ocean. The Southern Ocean is one of the world's largest oceans and it is nearly 32 million kilometres squared, which means that the whole of the UK could fit into the Southern Ocean 131 times. So the polar regions are really special because they help to maintain the balance of life on Earth. Polar waters regulate ocean temperatures around the world because cold polar water is moved by oceanic currents to warmer regions, keeping temperatures in those regions at habitable levels. Sea ice reflects the sun's rays, keeping the climate in balance. As climate change causes temperatures to rise and the ice to melt, this function is at risk. Melting sea ice and glaciers are also causing sea levels to rise, impacting on our coastal habitats in the polar regions and elsewhere. A number of species and habitats store vast amounts of carbon. Generally, the global ocean has been acting as a buffer to climate change, absorbing over 90% of the heat and a third of the carbon dioxide humans have ever created. And as mentioned, there are a number of species and habitats that can absorb that carbon, removing it from the atmosphere and lessening its impact. As these habitats and species are changing and disappearing due to warming temperatures, carbon uptake is now being limited and the carbon already stored is at danger of being released. There are a number of endemic species which are specially adapted to living at the poles. Endemic means that they are not found anywhere else on the planet. So for example, there are over 9,000 endemic species found in Antarctica. So let's take a look at some of these amazing species. So this is the Antarctic. So the most important animal that you'll find in Antarctica is this small one here. It's called Antarctic krill. All of the animals that live in Antarctica depend on krill, either because they eat it themselves or they eat something else that eats the krill. So it's the most important species on the whole slide. Down here we've got our crab-eater seal, which despite its name does not eat crabs, it actually eats the krill here that we just spoke about. There are 6 species of seal in total found in Antarctica. This fish here is called a toothfish. There are 2 species in Antarctica that are both commercially fished, and they have developed antifreeze bodies in their blood to stop it from freezing in the cold water in the Southern Ocean, which is pretty amazing. So up here we have orca whales. They are found in other places, including off the coast of Scotland. but there is a group in Antarctica that have specially adapted to eating the fish that you only find in the Antarctic, such as the toothfish. We've got the wandering albatross, are the largest of all seabirds. With wingspans of up to 3.5 metres, they can cover large distances when foraging for food, sometimes flying over 1,000 miles in one day. That's the same as a return trip from London to Edinburgh and back again. And we also have our penguins here. We've got a couple of species here. So there are 18 species of penguin in the world, and they are all found in the southern hemisphere, apart from the Galapagos penguin. 5 penguin species breed in Antarctica. So here we have our emperor penguins and gentoo penguins as 2 examples. So in moving to the Arctic, we've got our walrus up here. So both male and female walruses have large tusks, where you might think normally it would only be the males that would have tusks, which is in other species. So these are used for fighting, defence, and to help them haul out or pull themselves out onto the ice. This is a narwhal down here. Sailors used to think that they were unicorns because of their large tooth here. The tusk is actually a large tooth, and recent research indicates that it's used to stun fish to make them easier to catch and eat. This is an Arctic cod, related to the Atlantic cod found in Scottish waters, and it is an important food source for animals such as the narwhal. Here we have our Arctic tern. This is the longest migration in the animal kingdom, flying around the world throughout the year to experience summer in both the northern and southern hemispheres, which I think is quite a good idea. And up here we have our polar bears, of course. This is the largest land carnivore, and they eat mostly seals. Its Latin name is Ursus maritimus, which means the maritime bear, because they spend a lot of their lives on the sea ice and enjoy swimming. I'll be speaking about them a lot more later on. Unlike Antarctica, with no resident human population, people have been living in the Arctic for hundreds of years. Currently, there's estimated to be over 4 million people living in Arctic communities. The location of these communities can be seen on the map. Unfortunately, it's not very clear, but this is really just to give you an idea of how many there are and where the locations of the communities are. Unfortunately, both polar regions, including the species and people that live there, are increasingly impacted by climate change. This map shows the changes in surface temperature of the Earth from the 1800s to 2019. The redder areas show the places that have been warming the most over time. So that is, it's showing the change in the temperature rather than the actual surface temperature. So as you can see, as it gets closer up to 2019, the Arctic, which is along the top here, and parts of Antarctica have been warming the most, more than anywhere else on the planet. The changing climate and resulting increasing temperatures mean that Arctic communities are seeing their homes and infrastructure, as their roads and railways, become unsuitable or washed into the sea as the ground underneath them thaws or it changes. As well as climate change impacts, there are a number of direct human activities having an impact in the Arctic. So we have commercial fishing takes place, oil and gas exploration, 21.7% of proven global reserves of gas and 5.3% of oil are found in the Arctic. Mining, 40% of the world's palladium and 15% of the world's platinum, as well as 21% of global gem quality diamonds are estimated to be in the Arctic. We also have shipping activity and tourism. So what happens at the polar regions doesn't stay at the polar regions, it impacts us all. Scotland is one of the Arctic's closest neighbours, and what happens there impacts on us, and the actions we take in Scotland impact on the Arctic. As well as impacting on the communities, climate change and human activity are impacting Arctic wildlife, particularly polar bears. The Arctic communities mostly live in harmony with nature, but incidents of human-wildlife conflict are becoming more frequent with the changing landscape. As I mentioned, polar bears rely on a diet of seals that they hunt on the sea ice. As this ice is disappearing due to warming temperatures, the polar bears are spending more time on land looking for food, and they're becoming more desperate when they can't find their natural food source. This is bringing them into closer contact with humans that live in the Arctic as they search for something to eat. Unfortunately, this causes a very dangerous situation for both the people and the bears, because even though they look really cute, they're apex predators who see the people as food, and people often have to shoot the bears in order to keep their community safe. So WWF are taking a number of actions to help prevent these interactions between people and bears. We are addressing climate change by supporting research on climate change effects and funding research and analysis on alternative energy. We are protecting critical habitat by supporting research to identify high-value habitat areas, that is, areas where the bears feed, den, and give birth, and work with partners to conserve these areas. For example, WWF advocated for the creation of the Polar Bear Pass National Wildlife Area in Canada's High Arctic. We are reducing industrial impacts. WWF's goal is to ensure that whatever development takes place in the Arctic is sustainable and that it does not damage wildlife populations and ecosystems. So we work with companies and governments to promote sustainable activities. We promote sustainable tourism. Tourism is an important source of income for the people that live in the Arctic, but it must be done sustainably. WWF produced a set of principles for Arctic tourism in partnership with the tour operators. Creating safer communities. WWF has a variety of locally led initiatives to help reduce conflict between people and bears. For example, in northern Canada, we provided steel food storage containers so that the local people can continue to store their food outside, but it protects it from the bears who come looking for a feast. And in Russia, Canada, and Greenland, WWF support community polar bear patrols. That is a group of people who go out and detect and scare off the bears before they come too close into populated areas. We also support polar bear research. No one knows for certain how many bears are left in the Arctic. The best estimate is between 22 to 31,000. So if we want to build meaningful management plans for polar bear conservation, we need to know more about them. That is their biology and their behaviour. So for over 15 years, WWF has supported the Polar Bear Tracker project to gather biological and genetic information about the bears and then to track some of them by satellite. So satellite tracking is an important tool, and here is a short video just to give you an idea about what the tagging entails.
The researchers in the field, they encounter a polar bear, they take the measurements, they weigh the polar bear, they put on the female a satellite collar so we can track them throughout the year, and they mark them individually so that all this information of the polar bear is referable to a single individual. We take blood samples to look at their condition, to look at toxics levels in these polar bears. Tonight we are going to process all these samples taken from the polar bears and make them ready for storage.
So, as mentioned on the video, the female bears are fitted with a collar around their neck, but male bears have a different head to neck size ratio, so the collar would actually just fall off. So they get fitted with one of these ear tags instead. So the bears, when they're fitted with it, they don't notice, they just get up and get on with their day. So you can see this tracking information on the WWF website. If you go to this address, you can see all the bears that have been tracked. This tracking information is used by scientists to establish the bears' movements to identify important habitats for them that can hopefully be protected. It also allows scientists to calculate if there are certain patterns of behaviour or times of the year that the bears go to human settlements in search of food. So we have our polar bear early warning detection system. This is an exciting new partnership with Aribada Initiative and Wild Labs. The idea behind it is that it would be a cost-effective heat sensing camera system that is designed to detect and identify individual species. It's at an early stage of development, but if the system can accurately identify polar bears and send a warning message to the mobile phones of people in Arctic settlements, it could be used by polar bear patrols to provide an early warning to keep settlements and polar bears safe. So this is just an image of what the polar bear would look like on the camera. The cameras have already been tested in Greenland in autumn 2018. And the project is now moving on to the second phase, working with the Highland Wildlife Park in Aviemore to set up the cameras in their polar bear enclosure. The cameras will record images to further test the cameras and to record the movements of the bears in order to establish a baseline for the detection system. The baseline will be established by identifying distinguishable polar bear movements, so the system can accurately identify the bears compared with other animals such as Arctic foxes and dogs to ensure the warning triggers are accurate. Once this phase of the project is complete, further testing will take place in the field in the Arctic. So this is just a short video. I was lucky enough to go up to the Highland Wildlife Park a few months ago when it was safe to meet Hamish the bear before he moved to his new home in Yorkshire and to see the camera being tested in real time. So you can see him moving around there. So the darker bits are the warmer areas and the lighter bits are where he's not so warm. So you can see he's losing a lot of heat from around his nose. So and it's quite clear that it is a polar bear. So hopefully we'll gather more images like that to build up the system. Coupled with traditional knowledge from local peoples, the results of all of these efforts are helping us to reduce human and bear conflict and to better understand and plan for the changing needs of this iconic animal. So thank you for listening.
Presentation there on human and wildlife conflict in the Arctic. We are now going to be joined by Rhona live for a Q&A session. Hello, Rhona.
Hi, morning.
Morning, lovely of you to join us today. So just a wee reminder, if you have any questions you would like to ask Rhona, please add a comment to our YouTube live stream and we'll hopefully get around to them during this session. But we do have some questions that some schools have sent in this week. So we'll start with those if you're ready, Rhona. So the first one is from Inchinnan Primary and they are wondering, do you think we will be able to solve climate change?
Oh, that's a big question. I think if people, we know what we can do to help mitigate the effects of climate change now. That's individual actions that we all can take, as well as the big actions, sort of reducing fossil fuel use and things like that. So, if we all start to work together to take action, then it is possible that we can limit climate change and try to keep the changes not so bad. So I think there is cause for hope if we can. We are starting to see people make the changes necessary. So if we can all work together and maybe move a bit faster, that would give us a chance to do something about it.
Amazing. Yes, definitely a collective effort needed for this.
Yes, definitely. Yes.
Amazing. Cool. So our next question is from St Anthony's Primary. And the question is, hi Rhona, I'm 11 years old and I love geography. My question is, will the Arctic melt in the future and would it cover the land and change the shape of our countries around the world?
Oh, that's a good question. So if we know that the sea ice in the Arctic is melting, or it's not as extensive as it used to be. So it probably won't change the shape of the land specifically, but what it will cause is sea levels to rise. So that means that some of our coastal communities might end up being underwater. So that's sort of a big concern if the glaciers and sea ice continue to melt at the same rate that they are, not just in the Arctic but also in the Antarctic as well. Then that's something that we have to try and prevent by stopping climate change in its tracks and keeping the temperature rises to about 1.5 degrees. Then we can hopefully stop the sea ice from melting so quickly. And that's sort of the biggest concern would be sort of sea level rise from the melting ice.
Amazing. So potentially, but there is hope for us. We're good for that. So our next question is what Arctic, this is from Ralston Primary, which Arctic animal is the most endangered?
Oh, that's I think that's quite another good question. To be honest, I'm not sure which is the most endangered, but we do know that all of the animals that live at both of the polar regions are struggling because of climate change. So the polar bears, for example, we know that they are really struggling because of the changes in their environment, the sea ice. They can't hunt as effectively as they used to. And that's also the same, the other animals in the oceans are struggling as well. Sea temperature rises are having an impact in changing distributions of fish, for example. So we know that actually most of the species in the Arctic are struggling at the moment because of their changing environment. So yeah, something to keep in mind.
Yeah, good. It's hard to sort of pick a front runner for that, but yeah, there's concern for a lot of different species, it seems. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so our next question is from Ralston Primary as well. What interested you in working with WWF UK?
Well, I've always been interested in the sea and the environment and conservation. That's something that I've always loved. And obviously, I have been aware of WWF as an organisation. It's been around for a long time, and the good work that they do as an organisation. So it was somewhere that I always dreamed of working. And so I was lucky enough a few years ago to get the job with them because I like the fact that we are a conservation organisation first and foremost, but we also take into consideration the needs of the people who also live in the environment and try and find that balance between people and nature so that we can all thrive together.
Oh, excellent. Cool. So our next question, kind of similar to one we've had, but this is from Inchinen Primary. If global warming continues and we can't do anything about it, how long will it be until the ice melts in the polar regions?
Well, it'll be about 100 years. If we don't do anything, then that's the estimate for some of the glaciers. Certainly in the Southern Ocean, if we just continue to carry on the way that we're going, that's the estimate for. So it's sort of it sounds like it's a long-term problem, but we really need to make the changes now to stop these sort of big disastrous events in the future. So that we've got the power is in our hands, if you like.
Excellent. Yeah, it's not going to happen imminently, but we need to do something about it right now.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Cool. So we have a question coming in from one of our viewers today. So Roisin Connells is asking, on the polar bear tracker, it seems like there are no polar bears in Greenland right now. Do bears migrate?
Yes, so on the first part of the question, the WWF tracker just shows the polar bears that have been tagged through the WWF programme, but there are other institutions who do their own tracking programme. So there will be bears in other areas of the Arctic. So don't worry, there's not just the, I think there's 9 bears on the tracker at the moment. So there's more than 9 bears in the Arctic. But they do migrate. So in the talk I mentioned the polar bear pass, and the point of that protected area is, as the name suggests, it's an area that the polar bears pass through in the summer on their way to an important feeding ground. So they do migrate.
Oh, excellent. We have another question coming in. I'll just show it up on the screen from Kidi. How many polar bears are left in the Arctic?
So I think I put in the chat. So the estimate is about 31,000. So that's in different areas though. So some areas of the Arctic have more bears, maybe 2,000 bears, and they're spread around. But that's why we're doing the polar bear research is really important, so that we can get a better handle on how many polar bears are actually left in the wild.
Excellent. The more the better, in my opinion.
Yes.
Excellent. We've got another question coming in. So what types of food do polar bears would eat apart from seals?
So they do love seals. That's their favourite thing to eat. So, but if they can't get a hold of seals, they do scavenge for other animals. So if they find other sort of animals that have maybe passed away, they'll eat those. And that's why as well they go into the human settlements, because they want to scavenge through the bins and things like that for maybe leftover food that has been thrown away. But seals are their absolute favourite thing. But they can also eat fish and other animals like that too, if they're desperate.
Excellent. Very good. So we have another question. Oh, just popped up there. Could we make fake icebergs to help them find food at sea, or would they float away too far from the Arctic?
Oh, I'm not sure that that's something that people have actually considered. I have heard of a project where people were looking into maybe trying to create ice in the Arctic, but I'm not sure that really what stage of that investigation is at. But that's definitely something that people could consider. Yeah.
Excellent. So next question we have is Beth Monaghan. Do you know when the first polar bear was discovered, and how can we help to protect them from home?
Bear was know that they evolved from brown bears or grizzly bears about 150,000 years ago, which is a relatively short time in evolutionary periods. And the best way to help them from home is just to sort of try to live as sustainably as you can to help with the climate change impacts. You can also look up, we have a lot of information about polar bears on the WWF website. You can adopt a polar bear if you want to sort of help with the research, or it's basically trying to live as sustainably as we all can to help to mitigate the impact on the bears in the wild.
Amazing. That's really interesting that they weren't really discovered sort of more recently than you would think. That's nice. So we have another question coming in there. Shira Dreen, as the bears are traveling further afield, are they breeding with other bear species? Really interesting question.
That is an interesting question, and actually in my research for this project, I did find that they do sometimes breed with other bears. So they breed with grizzly bears. So they're usually born to a polar bear mother, and they're brown. They have brown fur, and they're sometimes called a pizzard or something like that. So it's a bit, it's not a very nice name, but it's quite interesting. So there have been documented cases of them breeding with other bears.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Cool. We don't have any more questions coming through at the moment, but I have a few questions of my own that I would like to ask. So first question is, what's your favorite Antarctic or Arctic animal species?
Well, that's quite a hard one because they're all really interesting. So I suppose in the Arctic, I would say obviously polar bears, but I do like the narwhal as well. It's such an interesting whale, and it reminds us of a unicorn. So what's not to love about that? But also in the Antarctic, the penguins are one of my favourite because they're so full of character and they look very cheeky. But also have to give a special mention just for the Antarctic krill, because even though it's the smallest and it's not that cute, it's the most important species. So, it's pretty amazing in its own right. So.
Excellent. They all have good qualities.
Yes, exactly. They're all
good qualities for us. Amazing. So another question I had was about your current work. What was the most surprising aspects over the last period working with WWF UK?
So I'm sort of relatively new to working on the polar regions work, but what I found the most surprising is that particularly in the Antarctic is that it's such an international effort to try and come up with a conservation and management for the area. There's 26 countries in total, and some of them are quite surprising. For example, Uruguay is a member of the Convention on the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources, which is the organisation that manages the Southern Ocean. So you wouldn't think that a country maybe like Uruguay, it's quite tropical and things like that, would be involved in conservation of the polar regions, but also the UK and other countries such as China, Russia, Japan, are all involved. So that was quite surprising to me, and also, but it's such a diverse group of people, so it's been an amazing experience working with so many different people from different countries and cultures to try and achieve the same goal of conservation.
I love that. I love the all around the world.
Yes.
Excellent. Got a couple more questions just before we wrap up. So next one is Catherine Ross. Hi, what degrees did Rhona study to work in this field?
So I studied marine and freshwater biology at the University of Glasgow, and then I went on to get a master's in aquatic ecosystem management at Napier University in Edinburgh.
Amazing. We have one more question. We've just come in as well. Hopefully that can pop up on the screen. No, okay. So I have another question of my own. You mentioned that you were able to go and meet Hamish the polar bear up in the Highlands. How was that?
But that was amazing. Yes, we were lucky to see him actually, because I think it was just a couple of weeks before he moved to his new home down in England somewhere. But it was fantastic to see him, and it just made me appreciate how special these animals are, and why we need to put so much effort into conserving them and protecting them and helping them to thrive.
Amazing. They are magnificent creatures. I mean, I've never met polar bear, but they seem just majestic wonders. They're amazing. So I have another question. Oh, we have one from one of our viewers, Kidi again. Could we release caribou or some other large prey animal to help polar bears out?
Well, that is an idea, but polar bears don't prey on caribou normally. I mean, if they were to find one, they might eat it, but they do really want to eat seals. So I'm not sure how easy it would be to sort of breed and release seals into the wild. But that's an idea for other species, is to sort of, with a rewilding program, you try and get things back to the way that they used to be for the ecosystem to thrive.
Mm-hmm. I guess we have another question there. Chloe O'Donoghue, I probably did not pronounce that correctly. Why does the ice melt when the earth heats up? Well,
it's the sun's rays sort of just heat up the ice and it melts, and sort of as the surface temperature of the earth is rising as well, so that's sort of melting the ice that way too. So it's just the higher the temperatures, the more chance it is of the ice melting, because obviously it has to be cold. We know from living in Scotland, when it's icy, it's very cold. So that's why we need it to be keep the temperatures cold so that we can keep the ice there.
Amazing. I have maybe one last question. Oh, we've got another one from our viewers. Jimmy A is asking, how are you planning to save them, and do you think it will work? I think referring to polar bears.
Yes, so I think because the main threat to polar bears is climate change, we are putting a lot of work into trying to address that and coming up with mitigation methods for climate change. And also, as I sort of discussed in the presentation, it's working with the communities as well who live in the Arctic, because to help them to preserve the polar bears as well. So that's the work that we're doing, sort of outlined in the presentation.
Amazing. So we don't actually have any more questions. I have one last question before we wrap up today. What has been the highlight of your career so far?
Oh, it's hard to pick one highlight in particular, because I used to go work at sea and go away on boats. So that was one highlight, because that's an interesting job to do, and seeing all different species and things like that at sea. Also, I did work previously on marine protected areas in Scotland. So that was another highlight, because it's great to be doing some practical conservation for the species that live in the oceans around Scotland. So that was fantastic as well. And also now just working in this job is a highlight, because it's something that I've always wanted to do and been interested in, and it's great to actually have the chance to make a difference to these amazing species.
Amazing. So we are sadly out of time for today, Rhona, but thank you so much for joining us today and answering all of our questions. It was really interesting to hear what your work is at the moment as well. So thank you again to our viewers as well for joining us, for curious about our planet. If you have any final questions, you will be able to contact you. If you contact Glasgow Science Centre, we can send them on to Rhona as well. So that's it for today, but I hope you enjoy the rest of the Science Festival, and goodbye for now.